What's up, folks? So my game plan today is to cut out the rust in the cowl of this Rambler. It's right around the heater core, and try to fabricate a piece to weld up in there. First thing I got to do, I got to vacuum out a lot of the rust that fell into the driver compartment. And I'm going to fold, I have the back half of the carpet installed already. I'm just going to fold it back out of the way and throw a moving blanket over it just so no grit or anything gets on it. Not going to take it out all the way. I probably ought to, but I'm not going to as of this time, because I don't think I'm going to be making enough sparks or anything like that that'll catch anything on fire or burn anything at all. So we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but we're going to try it this way. I'll probably regret that later. Hopefully not. All right, now that I have that all vacuumed out, I'm going to proceed to taking the glove box out and the glove box door just to get it out of the way. It makes it a little bit easier to see. Folks, it's cold. We're having a heat wave around here right now. I think it's up to about 25. It's been, been a cold winter around here. I've got the old wood stove fired up, getting it warmed up in here. It's not too bad, but I think we're about 50 degrees in here. I like to burn wood. I live in the woods, so it's free fuel. So any of you guys burn wood? Guys and gals? One guy? Really? Me and you, man. Me and you. Okay, let's investigate what's in here. Book of matches. I don't know. It's a free book, Succeed in Electronics, CIE. Apparently that's a tech school, trade school. Cleveland Institute of Electronics, Inc. Makes sense. I bought this car in Ohio. Not quite to Cleveland. It was probably halfway between here and Cleveland. But yeah, those are damp, no good. You'd have to have another book of matches to light those on fire, to light your fire with. Garbage, Johnson & Son tires. No, that's too heavy for that. Not sure what that is. There's a relay. That's a vacuum switch, actually. Might be for the windshield wipers, because they are vacuum operated on this car. Actually, the vacuum to run the wipers operates off of the fuel pump. It's pretty neat. They actually work really well. A lot of people don't like them. Here's some screws for the armrests. I know that because I recently took some armrests off and realized that I did not have all the screws. So now I know where they were the whole time. There's some miscellaneous fuses. I don't know. All this stuff goes in the secret stash on the roof with all the rest of the stuff. Let's see here. I don't even know what this stuff is. Alright. Now I can take the glove box out, now that it's empty. Not going to candy coat it, folks. It looks pretty bad from underneath too. Check this out. You can see that black box right there. That's the heater plenum, holds the heater core, and that's the cowl right above it. And that's what we're going to be fixing. Whatever we can get to from either side, that's how we're going to do it. But we're in for a little bit of a task here to get this handled, but I think we can do it. We can save it. All right, let's get after it. Okay, so those screws are hard to get out from the other side. I can get to them and get my socket on them and ratchet and everything, but they're just so rusty that they won't turn. I see those are square-headed machine screws, and the way those work is the one flat side rests against that step in the molded plastic, and that holds the screw while you take the nut off, which would work fine if they weren't so rusty. So what I'm going to do is center punch, center drill, and then drill through a combination of drill bits until I reach the outer diameter of the screw, which is about 1/4 inch. It used to be 1/4 inch, probably a 1/4 28 screw with a nut on the other side, and then I'll just be able, the head will pop off and I'll be able to push those through. So that's what we're going to do next. All right, see if we can get this somewhat in the center. All right. Well, I went ahead and decided to not tape the taking out of the heater core. It just was too difficult to do, to tape it and keep running back and forth. And I needed to get this done, so I just went ahead and took it out and cut the rust out. And here's what we have. There's a bunch of the stuff that fell out, the cutout and fell out, the rust and everything. Now that I have this all cut out, you can see the shape of the panel. The heater comes up to within about a 1/2 inch. The heater plenum comes up to within about a 1/2 inch of that bottom of that step right there. Give it room for the seal to go between there. And then it comes over and welds to this lip right here. You can see where the first mark I made there was a little bit crooked, so I made it again, cut it straighter. It was just at an angle. I just wanted to make the panel as straight as I could, It's pretty straight with the opening for the glove box. All right, so I'm gonna clean all this up, start making some panels. So we got all of our debris all vacuumed up, and haven't done any sanding of the rust in there, that, you know, the surface rust, anything as far as that goes yet. But right now I'm gonna start fabricating a panel to weld in there to basically just fix this thing. So if you wanna come along, we'll go over to the old Harbor Freight bending brake slip roll shear combo unit, and we'll see if we can get this going. Okay, so as you can see, we're here at the old metalworking combo. I actually picked this up from Harbor Freight. It actually does pretty good work. So I think it's worth the money. About 500 bucks for this unit, and they're pretty close on what they say it'll do. I have done a little bit heavier gauges than what they said it would do, but you got to work with it quite a bit, and it stresses it a little bit. You know, I always say, you know, put a longer handle on it, you can get more leverage on it. You could break something too. So haven't gone that far yet, but I've got this panel marked up, just roughly, you know, use a tape measure. Basically the dimensions that I need for this panel that I'm going to start making. And I left myself a little bit of extra. First thing I'm going to do is just shear it off widthwise, where I want it to be to start with. I'm going to leave all the length in case I need a little bit more once I set it up in there and just see what it's got, you know, how it fits. So let's get started shearing this off. Just line that up in the center of those paint marks that I put on there. Pull that down there close. And just off of there. Could use a little more leverage, but hey, it worked. All right, the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this stripper out of there. Make sure you wear steel toes. Safety tip of the day. Set this up in here in the old brake. And I want to make a 2-inch flange. Actually, let me make sure I'm going to the right side on that. Yeah. Make a 2-inch flange. So I'm gonna mark up there in the center. Actually, I left it a little bit big so I can trim it. Come down and line the V of this die of the male right up in the center of that paint mark. Right where I've got it. Pretty good. And then just bend it. You can overbend this by pushing it a lot harder, but if you just stop where it wants to stop, you'll end up with a 90-degree, roughly a 90-degree bend, and that's what I did. What I've got here is 20 gauge sheet metal, which is pretty close to what they had in there. It's probably a little bit better, but that's what I'm going to use. And I know that I need 8 inches between the flanges. But the first thing I'm going to do is just set this up under there, just to test my angle and my radius. I believe this needs to be laid back. It actually needs to be a little bit less than 90 because of the way the factory panel that rusted away was. Um, Actually, just set that up in there and pull that back a hair. Probably good enough. I haven't checked the angle, but you can eyeball stuff like this. This is not going to be something that shows. It's under the dash, but you want it close. You need it close so that when you weld it, it's easy to weld. It fits good. That there's just about perfect. You know what? I'm just going to go for it. So 8 inches from there. And I'll put this flange on as well. Same deal. Line your die up with the center of the paint mark, like so. Bend away. There it is. I wanted to leave this high on this side because I need to get up in there. I know this side is straight. I know that that's got to be the same distance from here to here all the way down, because that's where the flange of the old one is sandwiched between the cowl and the firewall. So I know that that's straight. So this, I'll butt this up there where the old one was, weld that. This side over here is what I cut with a slit wheel on my hand grinder. So I know it's not going to be perfect. Like I said, I want those joints to be as close as I can get them so it's easy to weld. So what I'll do is I'll put this up in there and I'll clamp it, and then I'll go on the inside and I'll make a line following the cut line that I made onto here. That way I'll know when I cut this, put it up in there, it'll fit right. All right, go over there and fit this up real quick. Okay, so I took a little break from videotaping just to try to get this panel fitted up. I've been working on it. I'm to the point now to where it fits pretty good in there. I had to cut a notch out of it just to fit it up in there, and I can actually add that later pieces. That's a good thing about fabricating. You can piece things back in there, piece them back together as you go. It's a little more welding, but you know, it is what it is. When you're working in they put these things together on an assembly line, and they do them at, an assembly process where things go in order. We're in we're jumping in there between a few different steps in the process of assembling this car, so not as much room to work. So sometimes you have to modify things a little bit to make them work. So what I'm going to do is I've got the hole laid out here for the heater core. I'm going to go ahead and cut that out with a slit wheel. I've started wearing this. I don't know how many years I've breathed in dust from these fiber wheels and metal and all kinds of things, and I'm getting older now, and I think it's usually when I do that, I'm always coughing up this stuff for a couple of days, so that can't be good for you. So I'm going to put this on. I've been using these for a while now when I cut. It's something really quick, like a small notch or something, I'll cut it out. But if I'm going to do a lot of cutting and really burn through a couple of wheels, I'm going to put this on. Same thing with painting or whatever. You got to be safe about doing this stuff, or you'll shorten your life greatly. So let's get this going. change the wheel. There's no need to really crank down on this arbor because it just makes it gets tighter as it goes, and it makes it a whole lot harder to get it off whenever you need to change it. Just like that, being tight, and it'll tighten up the rest of the way on its own. So you're probably having a hard time hearing me. But you know, some of you might not want to hear me. A lot of times what I like to do with this is just follow the line, just to kind of scribe it, and it helps the wheel follow a path. And then go back and finish the cut. Cuts a lot easier that way. That's what I'm going to do. Switch this to a different stand, just so I don't cut through that foam. Not in very good shape anyway, but it's decent. It will hold, it will protect something that I don't want to scratch, at least. I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap there under it, and hopefully we can cut that without getting into the stand. Probably going to use this wheel up before I get done with this cut. Also, a lot of times I like to leave a little bit in the corners until I get all my long cuts done, and then I'll come back and just cut the scrap loose. I had a shorter screwdriver, but I misplaced it. Got a lot of projects going on in here, and I do try to put my tools up every day, but sometimes I'll lay them somewhere and I don't see them to put them back away. So. Cut it loose. There we go. All right. Now we just got to deburr this. You can use this slit wheel for doing that. Just like that. You ever notice with the older guys, especially with older, shall I say, portly gentlemen, such as myself, bend over, we make weird noises. I'm noticing that more and more. All right. There we go. There's our cutout for our heater core. I have some more stuff to make as well, but I'll go ahead and show you the mock-up of this with the plenum for the heater core. You can see this piece here this is made out of just mild steel. There was another one on this side. It's like they're about 3/8 of an inch thick, hollow. You could use a piece of solid if you wanted to. It'd just be heavier. But I'm going to take this off of here. Normally I would just replace this heater core. I'm not even sure you can still get it. But it's so easy to get this out if I need to replace it later that I'll just do it then. I think it's okay. It wasn't leaking. So I'm going to reuse it. I'm just going to clean it up really good and test it. I'll put some water through it with a hose and just make sure I don't see any leaks anywhere. I don't think it was leaking, but I'll verify that before I put it back in. If it is leaking, I'll try to find a suitable replacement for it. There are websites that sell parts for these cars, but they're limited on what you can get. So yeah, I got to make these pieces too, one for each side. It takes up the space, keeps it from going like this. So basically, this heater core just slides in here like so. Actually, it's backwards. Lies in here this way. And then there's a foam seal. It's kind of like what goes on you around a refrigerator door, or maybe even a door in your house. It's just like a regular. It's a little wider. So I'm gonna try to get some of that, stick on here. It's adhesive on one side. You just run that around here and up. Then I'll make a new seal to go around these inlet and outlet for the heater core. Yeah, and what this does is this will, once this panel's welded in, this plenum will pop right up to it right there. When it's bolted in, it'll seal up with that seal around it, that foam. So yeah, I traced these lines. These aren't really extremely straight lines. But I cut these upside down with a slit wheel in the car. So what I did was I put this up there and clamped it, and then I just marked it, went along the edge with a Sharpie, and then cut it to fit that, and it fits really good. I mean, it's no big deal. You won't even be able to tell it. I'll get in there, I'll weld all this up and grind it down, and it'll look like it was always there when I'm finished with it, or it should, pretty much anyway. No one will ever see it again, and this will probably outlive the rest of the cowl and dash firewall. All right, so let's continue on. So as you can see, I've got my panel mocked up inside the car. Now I've got it clamped in place with a panel clamp. Makes sense, right? So you can see what I've done here. Now I'm just gonna leave it there while I take some more measurements for some fill-in panels, and then I'm gonna cut those and mark where they're gonna go, clamp those in place, and then I'll tack them and remove this panel, and then I'll finish welding the fill-in pieces, and then I'll put this back in there, start welding it in. Now right here, this corner, that's a rounded corner there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slit this corner right here with my slit wheel, and then I'll hammer this up, weld it, and I'll hammer this one, fold it over the other way and weld it, and it'll form fit, and then I'll weld that seam back up. And most of this will be welded up, but whatever's not, I'll use some good seam sealer on it, and that'll work just fine as well. But for the most part, this thing's gonna be fully welded, because that's just, I'll always say that I'm gonna just tack things or whatever, and then I end up just welding the whole thing, or doing what, just going overboard on everything. So that's probably what'll happen. But anyway, that's where we're at as of now. As you can see, I made this panel here to fill in a hole in that firewall that had rusted away. I'm gonna have to make something actually also to fill in. I'm gonna have to build a new inner fender section here that goes under the fender when fender bolts on here. Get a better shot of it. So the fender bolts on here, fender lip, all this whole triangle shaped section, I'm gonna make all that just to replace it. But section of the firewall there that had rotted away, I made a fill-in panel for that. And I also made this fill-in panel that goes underneath the main panel. like this. And it'll weld to the side and to this panel to hold it up and fill in that area. And that'll close in all this here. And then I've got this other section here that's forward there that I'm going to make a panel for and fill that in. And then after I do all that and get all that filled in, I'll push this main panel up and start welding it in. So now let's get started cleaning up some surfaces to make them easier to weld to, because you definitely want to clean this rust. It'll weld a whole lot better. You can glob it and stick it without cleaning it, but it's not how I roll. So I might still glob it. Who knows, sometimes sometimes you don't do it perfectly, but at least I'm going to clean up some of the rust, try to give it a chance. Here we go. All right, so made a couple patch panels. This one here is one that I made, and that's going to fill this area right here down to about right there, and then I'll make a patch to fill the rest of this where I cut that rust out on the outside. I'll fill that, but see this here just pops right in here. Let's bring this up flush top of that firewall, clamp that there. I'll tack that, and then I'll pull this side up, clamp it, and tack it. And when I get ready, then I'll weld through these holes that I've drilled. I'll fill those. Those will be like a pinch weld whenever those holes are filled in. Have I told you that I love old cars? I think I have, and that's good, because if a person doesn't love old cars, they would stop at the point where I'm at now, or they would have stopped way before now. It's actually getting better now. But I'm actually getting close to being done, but I've just got one spot on this panel that I cannot get to weld, and it's welding good metal to not so good metal. I can weld to it if I could see it and get in there and control the weld better. I could weld to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut another piece out. I've already taken the cowl panel off and cut a section of it out to get to a weld that I'm gonna weld it back in. Then you can see this section I've got right here that's marked in white, where I was trying to weld that without being able to really see from the inside, standing on my head. This part of the firewall there, cowl/firewall, was pretty thin from rust apparently, so the wire poked through in a few places. So I'm just going to cut that piece out. That way I can get to the top of my panel to weld it, and then I'll make a new piece for that section to put it back in. I've got this looking pretty good. Got this panel, as you can see, welded in there. And uh-oh, my tripod's kind of in the way, so it's hard to see it. I'll get a better view of it later once I'm finished. I gotta do some sanding on those welds and do some fiberglass work in there. Gotta make a gutter to go around my heater core. And that'll keep the water from going into the driver compartment, or the passenger compartment, basically. Because the way this is designed, this cowl panel that goes on top between the hood and the windshield has those vents in it, and the rain just goes in there, and there's that big open area behind the dash panel where the rain just runs in, and then it runs to both sides and down inside the fenders and drains out the dogleg holes. I don't particularly like that. That's the reason this rotted out. That, along with the fact that it's easily accessible for mice to build big nests in there on top of the heater core, and their urine and everything, man, just rots. It's acidic, so it just sits there in that soaked mouse nest, and it's nasty. It just rots everything. So we're nearing the end of this repair, which is exciting for me because I just got my interior all back from the upholstery shop. So once I get this panel in, I'm going to spray a bunch of rust converter up inside there to stop the rust that's actively still rusting, and kill it, and then I'll spray etching primer in there. Probably put some POR 15 in there to coat that, paint over rust, and seal that all off. I'll do some, when I put my gutter in that goes around my heater core, I'll either seal that with seam sealer or I'll fiberglass around it. I don't know which one. Probably seam sealer, but I don't know. We'll see. So that's where we're at. We're going to get cutting. All right, so in order to get in here, I'm going to need to take this hood off. So I got in here and I sprayed some penetrating oil on here, and I started to take these nuts off, take the hood out, and I guess the oil hadn't penetrated enough. Actually, I twisted this one off. I should have known better. I should have just heated them from the start. But you know, they're black and painted and everything looks good, but I think what's happened is the previous owner of this has sprayed this crinkle finish chassis black type paint on here to hide some of the rust instead of cleaning it. So what I'm going to do is get in here with my torch and heat these nuts up so that they'll come loose easier. Since we're doing that, I'll show you guys about starting one of these torches. This is your oxygen tank. This is your gas tank. This is not acetylene like most guys use. This is propane. I use propane because it's about a third of the cost of acetylene. It goes a lot farther. This tank here, this will last a year, where an acetylene tank will last, you know, a third of that time. It maybe it lasts. It's just a better way to go. Now it doesn't get as hot as fast as acetylene does, but for me it works just fine. You can cut with it. I've cut thick steel with it just fine. It just takes a little bit longer for it to get hot. Now, important thing to know about oxygen tanks is when you open this valve, this is a two-way valve. It's only sealed fully closed or fully open. Anywhere in between that, this valve will leak and you'll leak all your oxygen out. Having said that, this one looks like it's about ready to be replaced. Your gas tank, you really only want to turn it on about that much until you see the pressure in your gauge, because the reason for that is that if you have some type of an issue, a fire or something like that, you want to be able to turn this off as quickly as possible. Also, on these oxygen tanks, you don't want to use it if there's any oil around here. You want to make sure that that's clean and dry, because believe it or not, if this leaks, this is highly pressurized. I think up to 2,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. If there's a leak in this, it comes out under such force, just the heat from the friction will ignite any type of petroleum product that's near it. And when it does that, let me get rid of that. When it does that, it will, it'll trying to think of the word. It'll provide itself with fuel. I mean, the more it burns, the hotter it'll burn until it explodes. So definitely don't use one of these if there's any kind of oil around it. So what I'm going to do now is see if there's enough oxygen in here to do what I need to do. If not, then I'll switch the tank out. You want to turn your gas on first. So with a cutting head, that's the other thing. With a cutting head, this is your oxygen control. This green is your oxygen supply. So you want to turn it with a cutting head all the way on. Leave that on, and then you control it up here. So you give it a little bit of gas, light it, dial it. You see how it's got a gap there? You don't want that. You want to dial it back until it's about like that, until it's all the way touching. Then turn your oxygen on. Looks like our tip's dirty. We're about out of oxygen too. All right, so let's change out our tank. Everything off. Here we can see that right there. Our gauge settings. I turn my gas on. Way too much flow on that. You really don't need but about 5 pounds of gas flow. And on your oxygen, about 40 psi. All right, so now let's turn our gas on. Dial her back down. Give it some oxygen. And see that blue right there, that bright blue? Adjust that down until it stops adjusting. It's about a short, you don't want that squealing sound, right? About right there. And then you hold your cut lever. It's your high-speed oxygen. Hold that, and then crank it down until it's short again. There you are. You're done. Normally I'd use a rosebud for heating, but I lost my rosebud. I think I fell out of my truck when I was hauling this on a job. So I'm gonna get another one. But for right now, I'm just gonna use this. It works just fine. I'm just gonna put this on there. Heat those up until they're red hot. You really just want to get the nut red hot. You don't want to get the bolt red hot too. There we go. We'll just let that sit there. Do the same thing with these. What that'll do is that nut will expand so that rust that's corroded on the thread pitches between the nut and the bolt will have room to let go. Do is we'll, as this is cooling, we'll squirt some penetrating oil on it, and it'll suck down in there between the nut and the bolt. Turn your oxygen off first, because if you turn your gas off first, it'll pop. So I'll show you. Well, it didn't pop, but normally it will. All right. Turn all that. Get all that turned off. You want to lay this in a way that this isn't depressed, because if you lay it on that, it'll just activate it and it'll pump your oxygen out, a bunch of it. So I just hook it like that for right now. Turn everything back off. You could use one of those little handheld torches to do this, but it would take a lot longer is the only thing. You can still do it, but it'll just take a lot longer to heat everything up. All right, so let's see. That'll run down there. Let me see if it'll break loose. Yeah, see there? That one broke right loose. And you put a little bit of that on there. Same thing with this one. There. It's like magic. I like to call that the smoke wrench, or the blue nose wrench, or the fits everything wrench. Try not to breathe that. Could be hazardous. Nice. All right. Now, what we'll do, bring that off a little bit more. Not all the way. And I'll show y'all how to extract that broken bolt too. Now what we'll do with this, that's why I started with the top one. You always want to take the top ones out first, because if you take the bottom one out first, then the weight of the hood will pull that over and it can bend the hood. So you take the top one out first. Oop, I better squirt some more penetrant oil on there. It's still hot. Tighten it back up a little bit. Give it a little bit of encouragement. Got to be a little bit careful with them sometimes. Right off. We'll lay this right there. Get that one down a little bit more. Now, let's move the old smoke wrench out of the way. We're done with it. You may be wondering, how does a guy get this hood off by himself without damaging something? And what I'm going to do is ball me up a towel and stick under here. You don't want it to hit the windshield. You don't want it to hit the paint, tear it up any worse than it already is. Do that this side as well. That over there. And then we will proceed taking this nut all the way out. Hold on to the hood. That nut out. Then let this hood down like so. And just get off of there. Sit that somewhere out of the way. All right, hood's off. Now, I like to put these, when I take nuts off, bolts out, whatever, if it's possible, I like to put them back where they came from. So I will stick those back on the bolts, those studs in that hood in a bit. Right now what I'm going to do, I'll go ahead and lay this over that. Air cleaner's on there. We won't get anything in the carburetor that way. And then I'll get my old trusty respirator mask. Trying to be as safe as I can, you know. There's no way you could always do everything perfect, but you do it when you can. All right. One thing important about using a slit wheel to cut panels out that you're going to weld back. Now this is a 50 thousandths wheel. So I think maybe 60. Anyway, It's just the right thickness, leaves the right gap. But if you use a cheap grinder, they tend to wander around and they'll make your gap bigger. So it's harder to weld back in. So this is a Dotco. This is what I've used forever. They're expensive, but they run true. This grinder, I believe, is about $500. But I have had this grinder and used it in the tool and die trade for about 25 years. So they make parts to rebuild them with too. I've only rebuilt this one once. So we're going to try to cut this out as straight as we can. Dotco. I mean, there's other ones out there just as good. The reason I use a Dotco is because when I first started my apprenticeship, this is what the company I worked for gave me, and that's what I used there. So when I left there, all my tools were mine. They came with me, and so I've used this in fabricating and home shop forever too. So it's a really good tool. Should pop off of there, but some of the spot welds that I put on the inside are holding it now. So I'm going to get in there with my angle, a 1/4 inch angle grinder with a 36 grit disc on it, and try to take some of those spot welds down to where I can push this out of there. It seems counterproductive, because I don't like the way the welds look in there, and I just don't think they're good quality welds because I just really couldn't see. But as you can see, I mean, they probably would never come loose. I'm just a particular type person, so I'm going to pop this out and redo those welds in that section. Right, it's on the other side of this, and we'll go from there. All right, so now you can see that that's a whole lot better angle to get in there and weld. I can weld that seam up. And then I can cut a panel that'll fit back in that hole that I cut out. And that'll be so much better than it was before. Because like I said, that panel at the bottom there was pretty thin. That'll work really well. And then that's the only section that's not welded. Everything is welded completely across. There's no spot, it's not spot welded, it's actually welded all the way over. There might be some pinholes in there. So once this is finished, I'll use seam sealer on all the welded areas and possibly some paint over rust. Just to, cause that stuff's thick and gets into stuff. And you know, first thing I'll do is edge prime everything. So this should never rust again. You can see down in there too, now that, see that rust hole in the back. I couldn't see that before because it's behind the defroster plenum tube. And so now, after I did see it, I couldn't get to it to weld it. So now I can actually make a patch. I can cut that out, make a patch to fit that, and get to it from this hole that I just made to weld that in and seal that all up. And then the hole you're looking through where you see that rust hole, I actually cut part of that out. So I'll weld that back in. I'll weld a patch in that rust spot. I'll replace this square I just cut out. I'll put all this back in, and then I'll have to fix a hole down there you can see in the wheel well. I'll cut that out and I'll weld a piece in there, and that'll fix that. And then once this is all welded in and coated with some edge primer, seam sealer, paint over rust, or fiberglass, whichever way I go, then this will never happen again. There's another small spot on that side. It's nothing like this side. It would be really easy to fix. I'll just have to yank the fender off of there and fix that. Now down in the bottom of here, where the dog leg of the fender is, there's a bolt that goes right up through the bottom of that dog leg that bolts into the car that's rusted in, and there's nothing for it to bolt to. Whoever painted this car actually welded the bottom of the dog leg of the fender to the rocker panel. So I cut that to get the fender off. I'll fix that spot down there where there's nothing to bolt to, and then that'll be back the way it's supposed to be. And if the other side's that way, I'll fix that one too. So, you know, whoever gets this after me won't have to worry about this anymore. I've already fixed the tailgate. The passenger side of it was rotted completely off. So I rebuilt all that before I ever started doing videotape. So I've got pictures of that. I'll actually put up a video of you know, the pictures, the process that I went through to fix that tailgate and put the window back in it and all that later. But this is where we're going to stop for right now while I do some welding. Man, what a difference it makes when you can see what you're doing. I'm happy with that. You know, it's not beautiful, but that is a very good weld, considering I'm welding to, you know, kind of rusty metal. That bonded really well with the new metal that I put in there, and that will be really solid. I'll dress this and this down. I'll dress this weld down, you know, to where I can make a panel that'll fit on there, and weld that in. Next business, order business I've got is to make the patch back in there for that rusty spot, but I'm gonna have to cut that out first. I haven't cut it yet, so let this cool down a little bit. I don't want to get burned. So, all right, next.